Bonjour tout le monde, ça va bien? Grand plaisir d'être avec vous. This is a great day for Canada. Actually, it's a great day for Canadians. This is an investment budget, and I hope we can inspire the nation in building big things in this country. We're going to build, we're going to empower Canadians, and we're going to protect our sovereignty. But let me go to some remarks, and then happy to take your questions. Le budget que je déposerai aujourd'hui, plus tard aujourd'hui, arrive à un moment de profond changement. Les gens qui nous regardent à la maison le comprennent. There are some headwinds on the horizon, and Canadians have felt it at home, on the shop floor, in the fields across the nation. Le monde connaît une série de transformations fondamentales, à une vitesse, à une échelle, une portée que nous n'avons pas vue depuis la chute du mur de Berlin. The speed, scope, and scale of change that we're witnessing in Canada and around the world is quite unprecedented. That's why we need a strong response. Our closest trading partner, which is the largest economy in the world, is remodeling fundamentally trading relationship across the world. Évidemment, cela provoque des perturbations et des bouleversements majeurs pour les Canadiens et les Canadiennes à travers le pays. Il s'agit d'un changement générationnel. This is not a transformational. This is a generational shift, and we need to meet this moment with generational investment. To weather the storm of uncertainty, we will not lower our sails. That would be un-Canadian. Quite the opposite. We will do what previous generations have done before us. We will raise them to catch the winds of economic change because we believe in Canada. We will play to our strengths, take bold actions, and secure Canada's future. We owe it to this generation and future generations. We will build an economy by Canadians for Canadians. Reminds me of the shoes that I'm wearing today. You may have seen that from Saint-Cyr, you know. Made by Canadians, for Canadians, and this is the kind of thing you want to see. I'm sure you've seen that, but made in Canada. Great shoes. En d'autres mots, on va se donner les moyens de nos ambitions. I think that's what Canadians expect from this government. Prime Minister Carney was elected having a bold mandate to bring change, to do big things in this country, and Budget 2025 will deliver on that. Today, we're delivering an investment budget, the kind of budget that will make Canada more resilient, more prosperous, that will make Canada the strongest economy in the G7. We are going to be making generational investments to build Canada strong, from coast to coast to coast. This is a plan to build major infrastructure. This is a plan to build homes. This is a plan to build industries that will grow our economy and create lasting prosperity. This is a plan that will protect our communities, our borders, our way of life here in Canada. This is a plan to empower Canadians like never before, with better careers, strong public services, and clearly a more affordable life. Une mission essentielle de notre nouveau gouvernement est de bâtir la force ici au pays afin de transformer notre économie. On souhaite le faire passer d'une économie dépendante d'un seul partenaire commercial à une économie plus forte, plus autonome et plus résiliente aux chocs mondiaux. Nous avons lancé le nouveau bureau des grands projets afin d'accélérer les projets d'intérêt national qui vont relier nos régions à de nouveaux marchés, vont créer des emplois bien rémunérés et vont faire croître notre économie. Grâce à notre politique achetée canadien, lorsque le gouvernement fédéral effectue des achats, les fournisseurs canadiens seront notre premier choix. Point final. So our Buy Canadian strategy will make sure that, Canadian suppliers always, whenever possible, full stop. Notre mission est simple, transformer les plans projets, les projets en carrière et les carrières en prospérité. Our new productivity super deduction, I'm sure you've seen that in the budget by now, will make it easier for businesses to invest in new machinery and equipment and technologies. This is a message to all the entrepreneurs, the startups, the businesses across this country. Canada will be the most competitive country, and we are making sure that we empower you to do that. This gives Canada a competitive advantage over the United States, encouraging business investments across our nation. At the same time, our new trade diversification strategy, which is going to be supported by a Trade Diversification Corridors Fund, will expand Canada's reach and double our overseas exports within a decade. This is quite important. This is about resilience. This is at making sure that we reach new market together. This is giving a chance to every exporter in our country. This will unlock $300 billion in new opportunities for Canadian workers and businesses. This is us giving us the means of our ambition, making sure we reach this market, making sure we export more, making sure that we bring the made in Canada products around the world. And our very important climate competitive strategy will drive the investments which are needed for Canadian businesses to compete and win, most importantly, win in a net zero future. Comme l'a dit le Premier ministre, il ne peut y avoir de prospérité sans sécurité. As the Prime Minister said, there can be no prosperity without security. And our budget delivers on that as well. C'est pourquoi le budget de 2025 se concentre sur ce qui compte le plus, protéger notre population, nos communautés et bien évidemment notre souveraineté. Nous atteindrons cette année notre engagement de 2 % auprès de l'OTAN, moderniserons le NORAD, renforcerons nos défenses dans l'Arctique, équiperons les braves hommes et femmes de nos forces armées canadiennes avec l'infrastructure, mais aussi la technologie nécessaire pour protéger notre pays. Et nous ferons ça tout en favorisant évidemment l'industrie canadienne et les travailleurs canadiens. With our new Defense Investment Agency and our new Defense Industrial Strategy, as we build up our armed forces, we will maximize benefits for Canada. This is going to be an engine of growth from coast to coast to coast. We will maximize benefits for Canadian industries, Canadian research centers, and Canadian communities in the north, working with our Inuit and First Nation partners as we build dual-use infrastructures such as ports and runways across the north. To protect Canadians at home, we are also investing in border security, cracking down on organized crime, illegal trafficking, and sophisticated financial crimes, and we're also rolling out bail reforms to ensure that safe streets are a guarantee every Canadian can count on. Le nouveau gouvernement du Canada s'est concentré sans relâche à réduire les coûts pour les Canadiens et les Canadiennes. La toute première chose que nous avons faite après l'élection a été de réduire l'impôt de la classe moyenne en offrant des allègements fiscaux à plus de 22 millions de Canadiens et de Canadiennes. Nous avons réduit les impôts pour diminuer le coût du logement pour les premiers acheteurs aussi. Une mesure qui a immédiatement rendu l'accession à la propriété une réalité pour plus de Canadiens, en particulier les jeunes familles. And I want to speak to the youth in Canada. We hear you, we want to work with you, and this budget is made for you. We're going to make sure that through our investment, you can see a future. You can buy a house, and you can get the job that you've studied and you have worked so hard to get, and we're going to be there with you. Le budget 2025 s'appuie sur ce travail important que nous avons fait. With investment of $13 billion over 5 years, our flagship building initiative, which is called Build Canada Homes, will help double the pace of home building over the next decade. This is much needed in our country. It will build homes that Canadians can truly afford by leveraging new factory technologies that will cut building time by 50%, reduce costs by 20%, and lower emissions by 20%. Canadians are paying some of the highest phone and internet bills around the world. Our budget will increase competition in the telecommunications sector and give Canadians more options and lower their costs. Nous avons rendu le Programme national d'alimentation scolaire permanent, aidant à nourrir plus de 400 000 jeunes chaque année à travers le pays, tout en permettant aux familles ayant 2 enfants d'économiser $800 par année sur l'épicerie. Nous allons donner plus de pouvoir aux Canadiens en réduisant les coûts et en créant davantage d'opportunités, car lorsqu'ils ont les moyens d'agir, tout le monde en bénéficie et le Canada en entier prospère. To deliver on this investment budget, Canada's new government is spending less on government operations. Canadians understand that. You need to put the house in order. Canadians have been tightening their belt for quite some time, and it's quite natural that we do the same at the federal government. And at the same time, we're going to be, because the plan that the Prime Minister put to say that we're going to spend less to invest more, that's going to allow us to build the nation-building infrastructure and make the investments that will grow our economy. Our budget today puts forward $60 billion in saving over 5 years. If you compare that to previous governments, you would say that this is very comparable, and I would say exceeds in many ways what has been done before. And we needed to do that. We needed to do that. Permettez-moi d'être clair, nous protégerons les programmes vitaux sur lesquels les Canadiens comptent, comme le service de garde d'enfants, les soins dentaires et l'assurance médicaments. So we've been able to find the savings while protecting what is dear to Canadian values, to the progress we have made as people. Healthcare, childcare, dental care, these have been protected because those are the kind of programs that Canadians rely on. Et nous faisons des choix responsables et pragmatiques pour réduire les inefficacités et concentrer les initiatives gouvernementales sur les priorités fondamentales du gouvernement. To the Government Comprehensive Expenditure Review, we are focusing investment on initiatives that meet their objectives and complement rather than duplicate services delivered by other levels of government. These are the smart, strategic investment that will lead to $1 trillion of total investments in Canada's in 5 years and build Canada strong. So our investments in the budget will enable $1 trillion of investments in this country. This is what is generational. We're investing in ourselves, we're investing in Canada, we're investing in what matters to Canadians. So en conclusion, le budget de 2025 vise à donner aux Canadiens les outils dont ils ont besoin pour façonner leur avenir. En d'autres mots, pour les gens qui nous regardent, on se donne les moyens de nos ambitions. Nous bâtissons une économie par les Canadiens, pour les Canadiens. And we're going to move, as I started, from reliance to resilience, from uncertainty to prosperity. Et il s'agit de confiance en nous-mêmes, en notre capacité d'adaptation et en la promesse de ce grand pays. I have confidence in Canada and Canadians because we are the true north, strong and free. Vive le Canada. Ça me fait maintenant plaisir de prendre vos questions, si vous en avez quelques-unes aujourd'hui.
Thank you, Minister. The Minister will now take questions for 20 minutes. Le ministre prendra maintenant des questions pour 20 minutes. One question, one follow-up, une question à suivi. Commençons avec Étienne, TVA.
Merci. Bonjour, M.
Bonjour,
Champagne.
vous allez bien?
Oui, merci, vous aussi.
Ben oui.
Vous parlez de décision de choix responsables. Reste le déficit, 78 milliards. D'ici 5 ans, va encore être au-dessus de 50 milliards. Comment vous pouvez parler de choix de décisions responsables en montrant un déficit de la sorte aux Canadiens aujourd'hui?
Bien, la réponse est relativement simple. Vous l'avez peut-être entendu même de la directrice générale du Fonds monétaire international qui mettait en évidence la capacité fiscale du Canada et de l'Allemagne. Les deux pays qui sortent du lot, si vous entendez le Fonds monétaire international, qui est un peu l'organisation internationale qui regarde les économies de tous les pays du monde, il y a deux économies dans le monde où on dit que ces deux économies-là peuvent faire ces investissements-là, peuvent faire des investissements générationnels parce qu'on a la capacité fiscale de le faire. Quand vous regardez le ratio de la dette sur le PIB, quand vous regardez le ratio du déficit sur le PIB, quand vous regardez la cote de crédit du Canada, vous comprendrez qu'on a cette capacité fiscale-là unique dans les pays du G7 pour faire des investissements générationnels. Et c'est là l'astuce, parce que les gens qui nous regardent comprennent qu'il y a une grande différence entre les dépenses d'opération et les investissements. Quand vous allez à l'épicerie, vous dépensez. Quand vous achetez une maison, vous investissez. C'est un peu la même chose que le gouvernement est en train de dire. On dit en 2028-2029, les coûts d'opération vont être rencontrés par les revenus qu'on génère. Et ce qu'on empruntera, ça sera pour faire des investissements en capital. Alors, moi, ce que je dis aujourd'hui, c'est un plan d'investissement générationnel et on a besoin de ça pour faire croître l'économie canadienne, pour se positionner parce que, vous savez, il y a du vent de face. Le Canada a la capacité fiscale de le faire. on fait des investissements générationnels. Et si vous regardez, quand on parle de logement, quand on parle d'infrastructure, quand on parle de productivité, c'est exactement le genre d'investissement. Si vous regardez, par exemple, à travers le monde, dont le Fonds monétaire international va vous dire, les pays qui investissent dans le capital, dans la formation de capital, c'est comme ça qu'on assure la prospérité. C'est comme ça qu'on rend le Canada plus compétitif. Alors, c'est pour ça que je vous dis que c'est une bonne nouvelle pour les Canadiens et Canadiennes.
Justement, sur les infrastructures, vous annoncez également aujourd'hui un montant de 5 milliards sur 10 ans pour aider les provinces à bâtir des hôpitaux, mais ça semble quand même un montant minime. Est-ce que c'est suffisant pour aider les provinces à bâtir des infrastructures aussi sophistiquées qui coûtent cher comme les centres hospitaliers?
Bien, je vous dirais que c'est une très bonne nouvelle pour imaginer, pour la première fois, je pense, en tout cas, je pourrais peut-être me faire corriger, mais ça fait longtemps qu'on a vu le gouvernement fédéral investir non seulement en infrastructure, mais en infrastructure de santé. C'est-à-dire qu'on a toujours investi en infrastructure, mais de mémoire, en tout cas, c'est l'une des premières fois où on dit, on va même aller au-delà, on fera même des investissements qui sont dans les infrastructures de santé. Et ça touche les gens dans leur quotidien. Parce que oui, c'est vrai qu'il faut développer des corridors pour exporter. Oui, on va devoir développer le Nord. Oui, on va faire des investissements dans des ports, dans des aéroports, mais si vous pensez aux gens qui sont ici avec nous, pour eux, la première réalité qui les touche souvent, c'est dans le monde de la santé, c'est-à-dire des hôpitaux qui sont vétustes, des cliniques qui ne sont pas tout à fait adaptées. Alors nous, on dit, puis c'est plus que 5 milliards, parce que c'est ça le génie derrière le budget, c'est-à-dire que ce n'est pas seulement les investissements fédéraux, mais vous aurez vu dans le libellé du texte qu'on dit, nous, on va contribuer 50-50 avec les provinces et les territoires. Donc, dans le fond, c'est 10 milliards qui est sur la table pour les infrastructures de santé à travers le pays. Moi, je pense que c'est le genre de choses qu'on doit faire. Et aujourd'hui, je pense qu'on donne le ton parce que s'il y a un des endroits où on doit faire plus, c'est définitivement au niveau des infrastructures de santé. On l'a entendu de la part des provinces et on répond présent. On va faire notre part. Et je pense que c'est bienvenu de la part des provinces et des territoires.
Merci.
Bonjour, M. Champagne.
Bonjour.
Oui, il y a deux
Vous
micros.
allez, excusez-moi,
je vais
non,
éviter,
mais
la
j'étais
confusion.
tellement concentré, fait que là, je vais aller de votre côté.
Si je reviens à la question du déficit,
Oui.
78 milliards, vous êtes quand même plus dépensier que le gouvernement Trudeau ne l'était. En quoi est-ce fiscalement responsable?
Bien, c'est des investissements stratégiques. Il y a une différence entre dépenses et investissement. D'où là, quand on a dit qu'au départ, on allait présenter un cadre fiscal qui fait les distinctions entre les dépenses et les investissements. Puis c'est pas d'hier qu'on parle de ça. Moi, ça fait des années que je regardais ça. Le premier ministre aussi avait été clair. On n'est pas le seul pays au monde à faire ça. Vous savez, l'Angleterre le fait, Singapour le fait. Je parlais même avec ma collègue en Angleterre qui disait qu'elle aussi va regarder ce qu'on fait chez nous parce que ça donne plus de clarté, parce qu'il y a une grande différence entre des dépenses et des investissements. Ce que vous voyez dans le plan d'aujourd'hui, c'est un plan d'investissement, finalement. C'est un budget d'investissement. Et ça, le fait qu'on va ramener aussi nos dépenses d'opération avec nos revenus à partir de 2028-2029, ça donne confiance aux gens. C'est-à-dire que les gens comprennent que là, on arrive, on dit, bien, les dépenses d'opération vont arriver avec les revenus, puis ce qu'on va emprunter à partir de là, ça va être pour investir. Donc, ceux qui nous regardent disent, bien, c'est sûr que quand tu achètes une maison, tu prends un prêt parce que tu fais un investissement. C'est un peu la même chose avec le gouvernement, puis on a ciblé exactement ce que je pourrais vous dire, des institutions internationales vous diraient, c'est-à-dire où on voit qu'on a un multiple le plus grand, c'est dans les infrastructures, c'est dans le logement, c'est dans la productivité, la compétitivité. Vous savez, c'est un enjeu dont on parle depuis, oh mon Dieu, il y a des gens plus vieux que moi ici, mais ça fait au moins 40 ans, 50 ans qu'on parle au Canada que la compétitivité a diminué puis il fallait faire mieux. Alors là, on vient d'envoyer un message fort à tous les entrepreneurs du pays qui nous regardent en disant c'est le temps d'investir parce que là, avec la super déduction fiscale qu'on a offerte pour investir dans l'équipement, dans la machinerie, dans l'innovation, dans les technologies, bien, c'est le genre de moteur économique qui va permettre d'attirer ces investissements-là puis d'assurer notre prospérité à long terme.
Puis, en suivi, pourquoi ne pas être allé plus loin dans les efforts de réduction de l'appareil fédéral?
Bien, écoutez, 60 milliards, c'est tout un travail. Regardez le temps qu'on a fait. On est allé voir dans chacun des ministères. Moi, je peux vous dire, pour avoir présidé le comité du cabinet en charge de ça, c'est un travail très sérieux. Si vous regardez ce qui s'est fait par le passé, On a travaillé beaucoup parce que ça s'est fait quand même dans une période assez rapide. On a eu des propositions de chacun des ministères. On a regardé tout ça avec les fonctionnaires au ministère des Finances et on s'est assuré de faire des choix judicieux, responsables. Et je pense que ce que vous voyez aujourd'hui, c'est quand on dit il faut ramener des programmes, il faut d'abord consolider certains programmes, il faut amener de la technologie, il faut revoir nos processus, il faut adopter l'intelligence artificielle. Tu sais, écoutez, les gens le font dans l'entreprise privée. Nous, c'est un peu de se moderniser. Là. Ça fait des années qu'on voit que les dépenses d'opération montent. Les dépenses d'opération ont monté jusqu'à 8 d'année en année. Là, on dit on va retourner vers 1 Je pense que les gens s'attendaient à ça de nous, de dire, écoutez, il faut mettre la maison en ordre. Et cette revue-là va continuer. Il y a encore des choses à faire. Il y a des sociétés de la couronne. Il va falloir voir d'autres choses pour rendre le gouvernement plus efficace et donner des meilleurs services aux Canadiens. Vous l'avez vu avec l'Agence du revenu du Canada, où j'ai demandé un plan de 100 jours. C'est le genre de choses qu'on veut voir un peu partout pour être plus efficace, prendre la technologie, travailler avec les fonctionnaires, mais en même temps, je pense que c'est le genre de mesures qu'on avait besoin pour aller chercher des épargnes qui vont nous permettre d'investir.
Merci.
Next question.
The budget says the circumstances could exist whereby the oil and gas emissions cap would no longer be required due to marginal value. Is your government opening the door to getting rid of the oil and gas emissions cap?
Well, I think in your question, you were even quoting what's in the budget. I think the message we're sending is when the conditions are going to be met, we won't need the cap anymore. So that's what we say in the budget. There's technologies, there's different regulations around methane, and we're talking also about carbon capture and sequestration. So what we're saying is when the conditions are met, we won't need the cap anymore.
And why is your government scrapping the luxury tax on boats and jets?
It's very simple. It costs more to administer than what we receive. And I'm a very pragmatic person. If it costs more to administer a tax measure than what we get in return, I think Canadians would understand that's not the measure that really is helping us. So you understand, it costs more to collect the tax than the taxes we get. So I just look at the ledger and I said, well, if it costs me more than what we get, there must be a problem. And therefore, we said that's very inefficient, and we need to move on. At the same time, I must say, when you're one of the few countries in the world that also has a very strong industry, you have to be mindful the impact of that. But really, the answer to that is very simple. It was costing more to administer than the tax revenue. So I'm very pragmatic.
Next question on the right.
How are you doing, madam?
Good afternoon, Minister. Thank you for taking our questions today. Because you mentioned this is an investment budget, and we've spoken to some economists in the room, they were of the view that they were hoping to see more substantial measures on the tax side of things for businesses. We have the accelerated investment incentive, which was a policy that we have used in the past. So they were hoping to see more on the tax front. I wonder, how would you address that?
Well, it's good that there were economists in the room in the lockup, because I'm sure they would understand what we're trying to achieve. I mean, with the productivity super deduction, I mean, this is a game changer. I mean, you're making Canada, the most competitive jurisdiction for investment. This is great. And if you look also, now I'm going to get into the detail, I may lose some people with that, but if you look also at the chart of what we call the meter, which is the marginal effective tax rate, Canada is actually lower than the United States now. So this is a great message for investors, because we know that many businesses would have assets and investments on both sides of the border. And one of the things we need to do always is to see how we can remain competitive with our largest trading partner. And actually today, well, when I tabled the budget, the effective tax rate for investment in Canada will be lower than the United States. And what we have put, and that's why I was saying it's good news for small businesses across the country, because you also have what we called these accelerated cost of capital allowance deductions. So in a way, what you're saying is that you're going to be able to immediately expense what you've invested in technology, in equipment, in plant, in machinery, in patents, and in manufacturing buildings. So if you look at the legislation that was passed by the U.S. administration recently in Canada, and actually we did the work, you compare that, you see Canada is more competitive. That's the kind of, we want to supercharge investment in this country. And that's why not only the super deduction is doing, but if you look also about the investment tax credits that we've done for clean electricity, for hydrogen, for clean manufacturing, I mean, you look at the measures taken together and you start saying, wow, this is really a suite of measures that will supercharge the economy, and that's really what we wanted to do, because it is one thing for the federal government to do its part, but you know, you want also to allow for other jurisdiction and private investment to come, because when we say that our investment in the budget, you've seen that, will enable $1 trillion of investment, is you have to think, if you're doing a mine, for example, you have the first and last mile fund in the budget. Well, if you're enabling a mine to start, you will also have investment likely by the province or the territory. You probably would have a community that's going to invest as well because you're going to build it out. And you have the private sector investment. So we've been trying to be very strategic, very smart in using our balance sheet and say, how can I enable more? And that's why I say this is an investment budget. And again, if you look at the table of the multiplier, and I keep coming back to the International Monetary Fund, but the economists in the room would appreciate, when you look at what they say where G7 countries should invest, and you rank Canada, you get the AAA. Because we're investing in all the places that they say this is the way to do if you want to grow your economy, be more competitive, and be more prosper. And that's the shift we needed to do in this country. So we spend less so we can invest more. That's kind of the shift. That's why I say this is a generational shift, because there are some headwinds. People feel it at home every day. We have the fiscal capacity. So you say, okay, let's use that smartly. Then you say you make generational investments. But to enable the generational investment, you need to spend less. And that's, you know, the savings of $60 billion that we have been able to identify.
Thank you for your answer. And a follow-up. On a different note, the immigration levels plan for future years shows that the international student visas will be cut in half, almost. So I just wanted to understand how the government expects universities and colleges to stay afloat financially in the face of much lower international student intake.
So yes, we're bringing our immigration level to more sustainable level. I think Canadians understand that we had reached our capacity, or sometimes even exceeded our capacity to welcome. I always say, if you welcome people in your country, you have a duty to allow them to be able to find a place to live, to go to school, or to get service in the hospital. That's kind of, you know, you let people in, you have to be able to do that. I think what we're saying, we're bringing that to more sustainable level. But if you look in the budget, there's also a section about attracting international talent. You know, the best and the brightest in the world. We're investing close to $1.7 billion to attract some of the best and brightest so that they can come in our research center, help grow our industries, and build the technology of the future. And that even applies to H-1B1 visa holders. So on one end, you're saying, yes, we're getting back to sustainable level. On the other end, we're really focusing on attracting the best and brightest, because in many ways, when you go to the research centers in our country, and I've been to a number of them when I was industry minister, you see young people from around the world. You know, Canada is a magnet for talent, and we want to keep it that way, but we want to be very targeted in how we do that.
Mike?
Mike.
Couture with CityNews. The deficit is at $78.3 billion this year. It's higher than previous projections. So how do you call this a fiscally responsible budget?
Well, it's well within the range that people had expected, and people also understand that 75% of what we recorded this year, you would have seen that at the very beginning, was to you know, defend our sovereignty and offer Canadians measure amount of affordability. I think that when you look at that, no one would probably question the fact that when it's true that 85% of our trade is tariff-free, it's true that we probably have the best deal when you look at, you know, the 5.4% on average. But if you're a worker in Oshawa or in Windsor, or even in my home community of Letsuk in the softwood lumber, or if you're a canola producer out west, you've been disproportionately impacted. So that's why we had to respond. The $5 billion Strategic Response Fund is one of the answer. What we've done with employment insurance is one of the answer. Retooling, reskilling is one of the answer. We need to pivot a number of industries. And I would say in that, Mike, Canada is not unique in that. And that's why I keep coming back that, international institutions have said the countries which have the capacity and have the fiscal health, let me call fiscal health, should use their balance sheet to pivot. Because one way is just to, you look at what happened and you say, well, obviously we need to support workers. Obviously we need to pivot. Obviously we need to fight for auto industry in this country. And at the same time, the best way, we need to be less reliant on one market. So you need to invest in your trade corridor. You need to invest in the skill of your people. And you need to invest also to make life more affordable. So all in all, I think Canadians would understand 75% of it is really the headwind that we have faced, but Canada is not unique in that. The world has faced it, and you see it with global growth, which has been readjusted lower.
I want to follow up on my colleague's question about the,
Sure.
the emissions cap. When do you expect the conditions to be in place for you to lift the emissions cap?
Well, there's a number of things in that. There's technology, like I said. There's regulations around methane. There's a number of steps that need to happen, and when the conditions are met, we won't need the cap anymore, but the conditions would have to be met.
Next question.
Steve,
How are you? I'm
I
impressed.
kind of miss you.
I'm right
No,
here.
because he followed me when I was Foreign Affairs Minister everywhere.
I'm impressed you make your own shoes. I'm looking for size 10.5 if you've got something, maybe
You get
brown.
$25 reduction if I make them.
I wanted to ask you about defense spending and the commitment we made at NATO to boost it to 3.5% of GDP. We know that you reached 2%. In June, you put $9 billion more into the defense budget, and you reached 2%. But then you've poured $75 billion more into defense spending in this budget for a total of like $84 billion. What I'm asking you is, how much closer has this brought us to 3.5%? We're obviously not at 2 anymore. You're
Yeah.
boosting us above 2. Where are we now?
Well, what I can say is that the budget will allow us to meet our target, but in the 1.5, now we're getting very technical for people who listen to us, but you will know that in the 1.5%, you have these assets which are enabling dual-use assets. I think for Canada, this is going to be a way for us to build the infrastructure in the north that the northern communities will welcome, because Canada, when you look at that, we have a deficit of infrastructure in a number of places. In the north in particular, when you're looking at, how you protect Canada, which a lot of the discussion, as you know, at NATO has been around the north and how we can better do that. One thing I can tell you, yes, we're going to make the defense investment that are needed to reach our NATO target, but we're going to be smart. We're going to be smart, and that needs to be also a lever for the Canadian economy, create jobs here, Canadian industry, and at the same time, for communities in the north, this is a good news for communities, because if we're going to build runways, we're going to build port. If we're going to build installation, that needs to serve the communities. You will have seen in the budget, there's a section about how we provide, for example, health services in the north, and having a discussion to say, for example, if we're going to put a forward base in the community, should we not look at how there could be a clinic as well to serve the local community? How can we do better? I think my point is that the defense investment is more than just hardware and software. It's using that in research and development. You've seen the Borealis initiative. You've seen the defense industrial strategy, how we can favor Canadian suppliers, how we can make Canadian industry prosper. And I've said in other settings, you may not have been with me at that one, but I said that every company in the country should basically have a defense strategy, because there'll be significant investments made over the coming years, not just us, but the G7, the NATO countries. And you've seen that already, where companies, even the shoes that I wear, just to give you an example, they've been in business since 1933. They've made the Army Cadet shoes, they've made military shoes. So it's kind of, you do one thing, but at the same time, you can pivot and do something else. And I think we need to make sure that our defense investments serve first and foremost Canadians, and that's what we're going to do.
Sure. And a follow-up is what you're expecting from the private sector. You're spending, I think, about $280 billion over 5 years. You're hoping to catalyze $1 trillion of investment from the private sector. Are you asking too much? Are you pinning too much of your hopes in the private sector? Your boss famously, when he was central banker, complained about lazy corporate capitalists in Canada, about dead money. Are you pinning too much hope on the private sector, expecting $1 trillion of investment from them?
You know what? I have confidence in Canada. I have confidence in Canadians. I have confidence in our businesses. I have confidence in the promise of Canada. I have confidence that if we put the right measures in place, capital will flow. The economy will grow. People will find jobs, and we're all going to be better off. I believe in Canada, and I believe that what this nation needed was a pivot. Was the pivot because this is a generational shift. Like I said, you have to go back almost to, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and if you want, you can even go further, 1945, where the speed, scale, and scope of change, and it's not just me, Steve, because you would be with me at the G7, which we happen to preside as Canada. Colleagues around the table would probably acknowledge the same thing, is that the speed, scale, and scope of what's happening in the world is quite unprecedented. So how do you pivot in this new world in order to prosper? And I think Canada's making the right pivot, and that's why we were singled out in these meetings to say, you may have even seen, I think the French finance minister, Roland Lescure, said, they're going to look at what Canada is doing because people see that Canada gets it. And that's why I'm confident in Canada. And that's why I hope that people who are watching at home and listening, we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. These investments will make sure that Canada will prosper in this very different world economic order. Merci.
Final question, Jude.
Bonjour.
Hello, hi, Minister. Is the government still committed to the tax review that it promised during the campaign? And given the changes that you announced in the budget today, do you think corporate taxes are sufficiently competitive in Canada now, or do you expect to have to make more changes?
Well, I would say we're now the marginal effective tax rate, which is the famous meter. You'll see the table in the budget, makes Canada certainly more competitive than the United States in many respects, and probably one of the most competitive countries in the OECD. So this is a good start because, I always say we always need to benchmark what we do with best practices in the world. We're going to make this country more competitive, and by being competitive, that's how you attract the investments that you want in order to grow the economy. To your question, we've also closed a number of loopholes. You saw that we're going to look at transfer pricing. There's more to do on the tax gap. So, there's so much I can do within a few months. Give me a bit more time, and we'll certainly try, as we always do, to say, my mission is always to compare with best practices. What other G7 countries are? Look about the automatic tax filing. This is something they do, for example, in Nordic countries. We look at what they're doing. We say, that's very smart. For people at low income, they are entitled to these benefits, and sometimes they don't even file. So we said, why don't we make it for them? So I guess my vision and my mission is to look at all these things to make sure that Canada is competitive. And by being competitive, that's how we attract investment. And that's the journey we're going to be on as a country.
On climate policy, the government is really making industrial carbon pricing its central policy to try to reduce emissions. But the Conservatives are obviously have been attacking this policy now, similar to the consumer carbon tax. And you may come under pressure from tariff-hit industries like steel and aluminum about facing the industrial carbon price. So I'm wondering, how committed is this government? How sure is it that it will be able to stick behind one price and not cave to calls for carve-outs?
Well, we've been expanding on that to provide. I think what we need to provide to the investor, the private sector, and people who want to invest is stability and predictability. And that's what people want. That's why the contract for differences, that's why everything you've seen in the budget with respect to providing the benchmark for, looking at the benchmark, making sure that the rules are clear. I think what investors are asking from us is to be clear, to be consistent, and to be forward-looking. And that's what we aim to provide to investors so that we can see these investments in the country.
Allez-vous aller en campagne électorale avec ce budget?
Écoutez, moi, ce que je peux vous dire, je pensais que c'était la dernière question, mais écoutez, ça me fait plaisir de toujours répondre à vos questions.
Content de vous faire plaisir.
Parce qu'il faut que je fasse un discours en chambre. Mais moi, ce que je vous dirais, écoutez, tous les partis politiques vont se retrouver dans ce budget-là. Honnêtement, vous l'avez lu, que vous regardiez, par exemple, les investissements générationnels dans le logement abordable. Quand vous regardez, par exemple, ce nouveau fonds-là d'infrastructure en santé, moi, je peux vous dire, s'il y a des gens qui ne comprennent pas aujourd'hui, les Canadiens et les Canadiennes n'auraient pas tellement de patience. T'sais, si vous pensez aux gens, si vous mettez les gens au cœur de vos préoccupations, que ce soit les conservateurs, que ce soit l'NPD ou que ce soit le Bloc québécois, moi, je pense qu'on est dans un moment générationnel. Tous les partis politiques peuvent se retrouver là-dedans, dans ce qu'on fait. Et je pense qu'ils vont avoir à réfléchir vraiment à la position qu'ils vont prendre parce que les Canadiens vont se retrouver dans ce budget-là. Les travailleurs vont se retrouver dans ce budget-là. Nos militaires vont se retrouver dans ce budget-là. Et à ce moment-là, bien, je pense que ça sera heureux de faire un choix responsable. Merci
Thank
tout
you
le monde.
very
On va se
much.
revoir au
Merci.
Parlement. Merci. À tantôt.